Like my shirt? Isn't that kind of cool? It's true. Bacon makes everything better, and so does Mountain Dulcimer. I want to thank Kevin from Inkful Merch for his great customer service, and I'm going to proudly wear this shirt all across the country this coming summer. What's up, everybody? It's Bing Futch. Welcome to Dulcimerica. Thank you very much for joining me for this very special episode where we go back to the roots of how the Mountain Dulcimer was played back in the day. Now, in each hand, if you were a Mountain Dulcimer player some 250 years ago, you'd have a wooden dowel, also known as a noter, and you'd have a quill, basically a feather from a large bird, preferably something like a turkey. Really, really large quill. They'd pluck the feathers off of the quill, and then they'd play with the right hand, strumming hand, instead of using a pick, because you couldn't always just nip off to Guitar Center and buy a bunch of picks. So you had to do what you had to do. And I've heard some interesting stories about why we used the noter, or why the noter was used at the very, very beginning, and I'll share those here in just a second. But first I want to say that this episode is being brought to you, as every episode, by my patrons on Patreon. Every day they're a part of my art, and many of them pay just $5 a month for access to all of my CDs, books, videos, and tablature, and they help produce this program by helping to upgrade costs, fund research, and a lot more into every single episode. I love you guys so much. Thank you, thank you, thank you for doing what you do every single day. And if you're curious about Patreon, you can go to the open house in my featured tag section and download all the stuff you find there. Just go to patreon.com/bingfutch and have a little fun there. If you like it, please do consider becoming a patron on Patreon. Again, guys, thank you very much. So this noter here, Kendra Ward told me a story about how her father, when he was ready to play the Mountain Dulcimer, he would come in, sit down in front of the fireplace, and before he began playing, he would take this noter, place it on the strings, and do this. And what was he doing? He was scraping off all of the rust and gunk and everything else that had collected on the strings, because just like your noters and your picks, you couldn't just knock off to a music store and pick up strings. So they had to last as long as possible. This often meant that they became oxidized and gunky and nasty like barbed wire, and you really didn't want your fingers sliding back and forth over that. And that is where the noter comes into play. Not only as a method for getting that stuff off of there so you can hear the strings vibrate properly, but also to keep your fingers from getting torn up, because who knows what kind of material was being used to string these dulcimers. Nowadays, we don't have to worry about that so much, but it's a lot of fun playing with the noter, and if you've not tried it, I'll give you a little introduction here on how to work with it. First of all, how big should the noter be? Big enough so you can comfortably hold it in your hand. A lot of noters are about half this size, and I see a lot of people having trouble trying to maintain their grip with it. Some noters are super, super huge. Whatever's going to get the job done for you comfortably is the right size for your noter. Now, we're not going to use all of this, and we're not even going to go all the way across the strings. Not yet. We're going to focus just on the melody string, as folks who first played this instrument did way back in the day. They'd play on the melody string and leave the other two strings to drone on like the drone of a bagpipe. People often call this a bagpipe with strings. Now, there are a couple of different ways to hold a noter, and I go back and forth, but I was taught to go with what we call top side down. That means that your finger is on top of the noter, so it basically is an extension of your finger. Where you point your finger is going to be where that noter goes. I find this to be a lot easier than the bottom side or underhand method. Even though you got your thumb on the top here, you've got some knuckles. Hopefully you've got some knuckles. And with this way of holding the dulcimer, it's very easy for your knuckles and the tops of your fingers to brush against the top of the soundboard and kind of get in the way and make it difficult for you to play. So I like doing it this way. It gives me more clearance on the bottom, and it gives me a bit more accuracy. But I'll demonstrate both ways here by playing the D major scale from the open to the 7th fret. Here's over the top right here. Okay, And then here's the underhanded version. Underhanded is probably not the right word, but you know, underside basically. You probably won't get the knuckle drag if you've got a teardrop dulcimer. You won't have this upper bout quite in your way. So maybe that's kind of why that works. So, you know, adjust for you, whatever's going to be good for you to continue working with the mountain dulcimer and the noter. So for the rest of this video, I'll be going over the top like that. Now on both those passes up the scale and down the scale, I did not lift the noter at all. I didn't hop across. I dragged it from place to place, and that gives the dulcimer that signature slippy slidey sound that we're used to hearing. This allows you to get up and down the fretboard really quickly because it's not your fingers that you have to worry about scraping across the strings. So accuracy is really important as you're moving up and down because it's very, very easy to overshoot your target as you're moving, and you get used to it. Now, oftentimes, depending on the material, the type of wood that your noter is made out of, you might develop some notches, especially if you're playing the double melody string. I've got a single melody string here. And if it's a soft wood, you might find that you're developing some grooves there and that you'll always want to get stuck in those grooves. That can be good and that can be bad. I'm not even sure what kind of wood this noter is, but it's pretty sturdy, and except for being pockmarked from who knows what, I have not developed any grooves whatsoever with this. So see if you can find yourself a hardwood noter, and that'll work out really, really good for you. So that slippy slidey thing that we're doing here, keep your noter down as much as possible. And then notice that once again I'm going to the left side of the fret and being there as close as possible. We can cheat that a little bit, but you'll get more buzz if you're not right next to the left of the fret. The demonstration tune that I was playing there was Wildwood Flower. So let's kind of walk through that, and we'll talk about that targeting thing. So we start off at the 2nd fret. 5, 7, 2, 3, 2, 1, 2, 1, oh. We'll do that again. 2, 3, 4, 5, 7, 2, 3, 2, 1, 2, 1, oh. From here, here's the target you want to look for. You're going to hop mainly from the 7th fret to the 9th fret. The pickup notes would be 4 and 5th fret, then your 7 and 9. But in your haste to get up there, you might end up blurring this whole thing together. And that's completely fine. Keep your noter down on the string and make sure that your target for really making the point melodically will be the 7th fret and the 9th fret. But start your run at the 4. 8, 7, 4, 5, 7, 5, 4, open, 1, 2, 2, 1, 2, 4, 2, 1, oh, 2, 1, oh. So putting that all together, we've got this. Notice I'm giving 1 strum per melody note at this point. We'll get to that little turnaround in a second. Remember our target 7 and 9 here, starting from the 4. So once again, you can use a noter to run up and down the melody string, and if you keep that noter down all the time, you'll get that wonderful, wonderful sound without doing any damage to your fingers. I actually recommend playing with the noter for people who have sensitive fingers or who are having a hard time with dexterity on the fretboard. And you can use this and continue, extend your playing a little further past when you found that you couldn't play with your fingers anymore. All right, now, you'll notice that I went over at one point, actually got off the melody string and went over to the middle string. So that's something you can do with the noter, is you can get off and go to other strings. And what you'll see me doing here is, instead of going flat across, you'll see I angle the end of the noter down to catch the string, the middle string, and I'm not touching that melody string. This is where your selection of noter is going to come in handy and make a big difference, because if you've got a narrower head, it might be more difficult for you to catch that middle string like that. But if you've got a bigger all-around noter, it'll be a little bit easier, maybe a bit more cumbersome, but it'll be a little easier to squash that down as you come around. So a good practice with your noter is to go back and forth between the melody string and the middle string like this. See, I don't always nail it because this is a thinner noter than I normally use, but it's working. So the more practice you have with that particular size, the easier it'll be for you to get used to it and of course use it when you're playing. So let me put that little extra bit into Wildwood Flower. Some people play the extra bit and some people don't play the extra bit. And it goes like this. So I'm just going to come in and do a very, very simple, very, very minor turnaround by coming in on that middle string at the first fret and coming back again. I'll do that again. Just like that. So it's kind of a cool, nifty little thing we got going on here. Now, you can hit two strings at one time if you want to get some parallel harmonies. And you can even get over there and play the bass string if you want to. Again, you know, depending on how accurate you are and how big the noter is, you might get some buzzing and stuff, but that's kind of part and parcel of this whole thing playing with the noter, is it harkens back to a more traditional time when we played the instrument, and it's got more of an older than the hills, barefoot in the dirt kind of sound. Very, very primitive sounding. It's when we start using our fingers that we actually start bringing the mountain dulcimer into the 20th, 21st century. But every once in a while I like to whip this out and play with it just because it totally, totally takes the instrument back to its very, very simple roots. So we can get some parallel harmonies going on here. Then everything sounds like smooth jazz 104.7. That's kind of fun. So depending on how you hold it, whether it be from the underside like this with your thumb on the top, or whether you do it from the top side with your finger on the very, very top, whatever way is best suited for you to be able to play, that is basically how you work with a noter on the mountain dulcimer. Now, people ask me all the time, can you use your noter as a slide? Well, certainly you can. The problem with that is that the best kinds of slides are made of material that is going to better conduct off of the strings. Glass, brass, porcelain. These are all good materials to get a nice, shiny, wonderful, full sustaining sound. Wood is a bit more thick, and of course, depending on what kind of wood you're using here, you won't get the exact same effect, but you can use it as a slide, which means you would lay the noter down on top of the strings, but don't push down on them. And instead of going just to the left of the fret, you'll want to park the noter directly over the top of the fret. See, it's the fret itself that is shortening the string. So by pushing down to the left of it, the string no longer goes from the bridge to the nut. By pushing down to the left of the fret, the strings will only go from the bridge to that fret, period. So what we're doing is making the fret work and do what it's supposed to do. We're not using our finger to shorten the string. We're using our finger to make the fret shorten the string. I hope that makes some sense there. So if we're going to play slide, we want to put that slide dowel noter right on top of the fret, because now it is what is shortening the string, not the fret and not the finger. So how does that sound? The cool thing about this is that a slide turns your mountain dulcimer into a chromatic dulcimer, and even more than a chromatic dulcimer. Wherever you stop it, you're going to get those tones. And when we lengthen the string, we are dropping the pitch. And when we shorten the string, we're raising the pitch. And anywhere we stop, there are going to be some notes there, whether they're recognized by our Western musical scale or not. Our scale is broken up into semitones or half steps. So every single time you hit one of these frets that are close together, these are all half steps, the narrow steps, 1.5, 2, 3. So those are all half steps. So if we stop right smack dab in the middle between one of these wide frets, that's going to give us a half step. So you'll be able to hear the chromatic scale continue. Let's start from the 3rd fret, and you can hear. There I played a fully chromatic run from the 3rd fret to the 5th fret. Of course, there are other scales out there that break up into quarter tones or even microtones. And as far as you can tell, if you can get in there, there are a lot of different tones inside of there. Every single time I move my noter, I'm getting a slightly different tone. And there are cultures in the world that recognize every single one of those as an individual note. It's mind-boggling to think about, isn't it? That's a lot of notes. And that's a whole other subject. But as you're dragging this thing around, you'll be able to get notes that you don't normally have available to you on the mountain dulcimer. It would sound a lot better again with a harder piece of material and an actual slide. The problem with the actual slides is that they are heavy and can sometimes cause a lot more rattling. One way of getting past that is to hold the noter in your hand like this and then drag along some fingers behind it. That'll see some of the rattling and give you a clearer tone. So that's something else fun that you can do with the noter. If you want to get into true slide playing though, grab yourself a glass one or a porcelain one to begin with. They're not as heavy as the brass slides, and have fun with that. You may also want to raise your action, and that is, again, another episode. So I hope you enjoyed this look at playing with the noter. I know some of you out there have been asking for this for quite some time, so I delivered to you. And I want to like to see a lot more people out there playing with the noter because it really takes us back to the original sound of a traditional mountain dulcimer. Thanks again, everybody. We'll see you next time. I've got some more tricks up my sleeve before summer tour. Thanks for watching. We'll see you soon.